Hi, boys and girls. We're going to be reading chapter 2 of Black Beauty today. So for those of you who have a copy of the book, you can follow along. If not, I am going to present my screen again so you can follow along with a version of the text. So it should match what you have if you do have a book. We read chapter 1, My Early Home, before, as we learned about Black Beauty, the horse who is the main character of our story. What his life was like as he was first growing up. We're going to read chapter 2, The Hunt. Before I was 2 years old, a circumstance happened which I have never forgotten. It was early in the spring, there had been a little frost in the night, and a light mist still hung over the plantations and meadows. I and the other colts were feeding at the lower part of the field when we heard, quite in the distance, what sounded like the cry of dogs. The oldest of the colts raised his head, pricked his ears, and said, "There are the hounds," and immediately cantered off, followed by the rest of us to the upper part of the field, where we could look over the hedge and see several fields beyond. My mother and an old riding horse of our mother's were also standing near, and seemed to know all about it. "They have found a hare," said my mother, "and if they come this way, we shall see the hunt." Now, a hare, H-A-R-E, right here, is like a rabbit. So all of these horses and their riders are hunting rabbits or hares. And soon the dogs were all tearing down the field of young wheat next to ours. I never heard such a noise as they made. They did not bark, nor howl, nor whine, but kept on a yo, whoa, 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 yo at the top of their voices. After them came a number of men on horseback, some of them in green coats, all galloping as fast as they could. The old horse snorted and looked eagerly after them, and we young colts wanted to be galloping with them. But they were soon away in the fields lower down. Here it seemed as if they had come to a stand. The dogs left off barking and ran about every way with their noses to the ground. "They've lost the scent," said the old horse. "Perhaps the hare will get off." "Now, what hare?" I said. "Oh, I don't know what hare. Likely enough it might be one of our own hares out of the plantation. Any hare they find will do for the dogs and men to run after. And they are not needing this for food. It really is a sport or game for them. Some of you might even participate in hunting with your families, but they are not going to be doing this because they need the rabbit for whatever reason. It really is just a fun activity for them to be part of. So any hare they find will do for the dogs and the men to run after. And before long, the dogs began their yo, whoa, whoa again. And back they came all together at full speed, making straight for our meadow at the part where the high bank and the hedge overhang the brook. "Now we shall see the hare," said my mother. And just then a hare, wild with fright, rushed by and made for the plantation. On came the dogs, they burst over the bank, leapt the stream, and came dashing across the field, followed by the huntsmen. 6 or 8 men leaped their horses clean over, close upon the dogs. The hare tried to get through the fence. It was too thick, and she turned sharp round to make for the road. But it was too late. The dogs were upon her with their wild cries. We heard one shriek, and that was the end of her. One of the huntsmen rode up and whipped off the dogs, who would soon have torn her to pieces. He held her up by the leg, torn and bleeding, and all the gentlemen seemed well pleased. So these dogs are trained to hunt for these animals, and they want to eat the hare completely when they find him. But the men are trying to save it so that it is still dead, but they don't want the dogs just to eat it. They're keeping it. As for me, I was so astonished that I did not at first see what was going on by the brook. And a brook, by the way, is like a little stream. But when I did look, there was a sad sight. All right, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. 2 fine horses were down. One was struggling in the stream, and the other was groaning on the grass. One of the riders was getting out of the water covered with mud, but the other lay quite still. "His neck is broken," said my mother. "And serve him right, too," said one of the colts. I thought the same, but Mother did not join with us. "Well, no," she said, "you must not say that. But though I am an old horse, and have seen and heard a great deal, I never yet could make out why I'm fond of this sport. They so often hurt themselves, often spoil good horses, and tear up the fields, and all for a hare or a fox or a stag that they could get more easily some other way. But we are only horses and don't know." So she's saying, I don't understand why they do this. She sees, and she's quite an old horse, so she's seen this a lot. Horses and at times men, but especially these horses, get hurt because they are involved in this sport, this activity. Now, it's sad that anybody would get hurt over something that's just for fun. Now, these horses, at times, over 100 years ago, people were using horses like in battles, and horses could get killed then, or at least injured. But it was, doing something that was quite noble. But she thought that it was very sad that the horses didn't have to get hurt. There were other ways in which to get this hare or rabbit. But the ways that they went about it meant that the horses kept getting injured over and over again. Now, whilst my mother was saying this, we stood and looked on. Many of the riders had gone to the young man, but my master, who had been watching what was going on, was the first to raise him. His head fell back and his arms hung down, and everyone looked very serious. There was no noise now. Even the dogs were quiet, and seemed to know that something was wrong. They carried him to our master's house. I heard afterwards that it was young George Gordon, the squire's only son, a fine, tall young man and the pride of his family. So we'll hear more about Squire Gordon. Squire is a term that was used in England for a person who had a lot of land. So this person was one of the richest in town. He had a lot of land, possibly a lot of people worked for him. And it was George Gordon, his son, that is injured from this. And we later find out he's actually dead from falling into the stream or brook. Now there was now riding off in all directions to the doctor's, to the farrier's, and no doubt to Squire Gordon's, to let him know about his son. When Mr. Bond, the farrier, came to look at the black horse that lay groaning on the grass, he felt him all over and shook his head. One of his legs was broken. This is one of the horse's legs. Then someone ran to our master's house and came back with a gun. Presently there was a loud bang and a dreadful shriek, and then all was still. The black horse moved no more. So they killed this horse because he had a broken leg. And there's two sides to this. I'm sure most of you think it's really sad that the horse didn't need to die. It was just a broken leg, which is very true. And maybe these people, they thought, the horse was no good to them anymore because of that broken leg. But sometimes it can be actually nicer to an animal to kill them if they are hurting so badly. If they have great injuries or they're very, very sick, sometimes it's better for the animal to just be put down. Some of you might have had pets that we use the term put down for when that animal is killed. If they were really, really sick and old and maybe limping and can barely get up, it's the nice thing to do to them, maybe to have them put down so that they don't keep living in misery. So that's something that would be good to talk to your parents about if you've had any pets that have had to be put down before. So that's kind of what's happening here, but it is possible that he wasn't in that bad of pain and the people just didn't want to keep a horse that wasn't going to do anything good for them. So that's really sad. Now, my mother seemed much troubled. She said she had known that horse for years and that his name was Rob Roy. We're going to find out later why Black Beauty's mother is especially sad about this horse, Rob Roy, who she's known for years. He was a good, bold horse, and there was no vice in him. And a vice means, let me point to it here. Vice is like something bad. So he was a good horse, and he didn't have any like bad problems. Like, he wouldn't kick people, he wouldn't bite, he was obedient. He was really a good horse. She never would go to that part of the field afterward. Now, not many days after, we heard the church bell tolling for a long time, and looking over the gate, we saw a long, strange black coach that was covered with black cloth and was drawn by black horses. After that came another, and another, and another, and all were black, while the church bell kept tolling, tolling. They were carrying young Gordon to the churchyard to bury him. He would never ride again. What they did with Rob Roy, I never know, but 'twas all for one little hair. So the boy, George Gordon, he died, and so did Rob Roy, and it was all just for a game or a sport. So it's sad to think of anybody doing something that risks their life, for just the sake of a game like this. It wasn't that they were going off to battle or war where they're doing something good for other people and sacrificing their life. Instead, it's just for a game. So that is a sad part of Black Beauty's growing up. In our next chapter, chapter 3, we're going to hear what it's like for Black Beauty to be broken in, which means that sounds really bad, like they're going to break something on him, like his leg. But actually, it's a good thing. It's when they're teaching the horse how to get used to being around humans and wearing a saddle, and actually having a human ride them. So that's a pretty normal thing for horses to get used to. And we'll see that in our next chapter. Okay, I will talk to you later.